Colman Domingo is Bayard Rustin. You may not know who that is, but you should, and you will if you see the movie Rustin, which I know Alonzo was very, very excited about.
Yeah, for years, I would get asked to like submit things for articles or whatever, where someone would ask, like, who's a historical figure that you think should have a biopic made about them? And for years, my answer has been Bayard Rustin. So here we are, finally.
We are going to put together the largest peaceful protest made up of angelic troublemakers such as yourselves.
Bayard Rustin had a fascinating life. He was a nightclub singer, and he was an activist, starting with like the Montgomery bus boycott, which is sort of the action that originally put Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on the map. And he eventually became one of the principal architects of the March on Washington, all while being an openly gay man in the 1950s and 60s, which everybody knew about, and certainly political opponents of King and of the movement in general tried to use as a way to discredit them. At one point, I think Hoover started a rumor that Rustin and King had been lovers or something, which was not true. So yeah, Colman Domingo is Bayard Rustin, and you get the sense of this person who gets stuff done, and he is butting up against the black establishment of that moment. Roy Wilkins of the NAACP, played by Chris Rock. Jeffrey Wright, who plays
Adam Clayton Powell.
Adam Clayton Powell, thank you. I knew it was a three-namer.
Congressman.
Yes, who like didn't want the march to happen at all. And then once the march sort of became inevitable, they did everything they could to sort of dissociate Rustin from it, even though Rustin is really the guy who like did the legwork and made this thing happen, and created these coalitions with labor, and got all these young people to organize the porta potties, all the stuff that you have to do to make this thing. The film wisely, I think, focuses on putting together the march, but you get senses of other periods of his life and stuff that happened. There's a character who I don't know if he's like a fictional composite or not, but basically a closeted preacher who is briefly involved with Rustin, but ultimately has to kind of deal with his marriage and his flock and whatnot, and has to sort of like repress himself. They're not rewriting the rules of the biopic here. This is co-written by Julian Breece, who originally came up with the story, and then it's co-written with Dustin Lance Black, who did Milk, which I think is also a movie that doesn't really rewrite the rules of the biopic. But it's directed by George C. Wolfe, who most recently did Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. He's great with actors and great with period detail. I think both of those things are terrific in this movie, the performances and just the sense of time and place. And it's just a story that a lot of people don't know. This is a historical figure that I think many people are going to be encountering for the first time. Yeah. And I think that Rustin is such a fascinating figure in terms of, we now talk about this idea of intersectionalism, but here you have an openly gay man, as one of the major figures in the fight for, Black civil rights, and, how those things were very separate then and maybe are a little closer together now. So I think this movie is fascinating in the way that it explores the complications of being that person at that point in history.
Yeah, Colman Domingo is just a force of nature in this movie. So much so, it is so flamboyantly over the top at the beginning that I couldn't decide, was this awesome or was it terrible? Like, it's such a big, showy, in your face, like back of the theater kind of performance at first, that I'm like, ooh. And I think he's a fantastic performer. He's so compelling in everything he does. He always brings just surprising elements to whatever role he's playing. He was so great in Zola. I know he's going to be in The Color Purple later on this year. Yep. So once he settles down, once the film settles down and gets into like the nitty gritty of his life, of like balancing being a gay man and his loneliness and his desire for companionship, but also this drive to make a huge difference in this country at this tumultuous time, like that conflict is interesting. I found him more interesting as a gay man trying to find love, trying to find companionship, and just those struggles and it's not a hypocrisy, I guess, but the disappointment that people who were fighting for civil rights couldn't see that he had some to fight for as well as a gay man, like that they could like bifurcate those needs and, the quality of that.
To this day, there are people who can't put those two things together. And I think certainly in the 60s, technically not only was being queer illegal, but like we were still in the DSM, it was still considered a mental disorder. And that didn't change until like the late 60s, early 70s. And so I think, yes, there were absolutely people who were fighting for civil rights. You had Frank Kameny and people protesting at the time, but it was still, bubbling under. And it was the kind of, we see a bar raid in this movie. Yeah. And this is, about a decade or so before Stonewall happens. I have a question. Do you think that Domingo's performance calms down, or did you just get used to it, or get used to the idea that that's what Rustin was really like, and that he wasn't hamming it up, he was just playing this character who was himself this kind of larger than life figure? I
think George C. Wolfe's theater background comes on strong with just like the way it's edited off the top and the way he's depicted off the top. And I do think that once the quieter moments come in, like that nuance and that shading of the character worked more for me, and it all felt like of a piece. But in the beginning, it's almost like a parody, and it's exciting to watch. Like, wow, what's he doing here? But then once you see the understated moments, like the scenes he has with Gus Halper as his like longtime right-hand man, but also his lover sometimes. Like there's some interesting complications in that. The whole cast is really great though. Like CCH Pounder is in this. Audra McDonald is just in a couple of scenes as Ella Baker in this. Jeffrey Wright, you mentioned. I want to mention Adrienne Warren is her name. She plays the wife of this preacher that he's involved in, and she has like one exquisitely tense, like beautifully acted scene on the phone. And so there's so much to like here, but a lot of times the writing just felt to me like people standing around explaining history to each other in a way that felt a little stilted and a little stiff. And then, I know we don't agree on this part. Like, I actually wouldn't have shown the March on Washington. I would have shown like everything leading up to it, and then like end it right there. Like show King at the podium, and then like don't have him say a word, because we know that so well. And recreating it, and we've seen it recreated. Recently we've seen King in Selma. We've seen him recreated recently, and I just feel like it's so iconic that it all feels like we've seen this so many times before. Like, and this is not King's story; it's Rustin's story. And from that point on, it's like just recreating important moments we've seen a million times. So I just felt like you could have ended on a powerful note right there.
I think that's a valid argument. I think that the "I Have a Dream" speech is so embedded in our collective psyche that to try and recreate it is to ask for just disappointment. I will say Ameen, who plays King, does a great job, and really I think shows a human side of the character that we don't always get in movies, in the way that One Night in Miami kind of gave you that human side of Malcolm X, like these are like these incredible speakers, these charismatic, magnetic leaders, but they also could kick back and like take their shoes off and talk to their wives and just be, people, human beings. And so, I enjoyed seeing that. Glynn Turman is great in this. Divine Joy Randolph, who we enjoy so much in The Holdovers, pops up as Mahalia Jackson, and that's a great cameo.
But that's like tantalizing. Like, don't you want more? Like, oh, we could have had Divine Joy Randolph. Like, it's Divine Joy Randolph week here at Breakfast All Day.
Absolutely, and always in our hearts. Bill Irwin. I mean, this is I think really it's well done. But you're right. It does fall in the trap of the sort of hokey biopic, like let's explain things to the audience stuff. But at the same time, like as much as Wolfe is a stage guy, there's at least one really fun montage in this as they're like going out and hitting the streets and raising money for the march. I just was thinking like, ooh, you need a montage, And it was a pretty good one, I thought.
So and as you say, like people probably for the most part don't know who Bayard Rustin is. So if it introduces them to his impactful work, then that is worthwhile right there. So what's your number then?
I'd say 7.5, and see if you can find the documentary Bayard Rustin, Brother Outsider.
Okay. I will say 7. We're not that far off, actually. So Rustin is in theaters this weekend. Is it coming?
It is, Netflix? And it will be premiering on Netflix on November 17th.
Okay. Go check it out.